Look, this would be disturbing under any circumstances, but it must be noted that James has been a Biden administration antagonist. And as recently as a month ago or so, he published an explosive video series claiming that there are real problems with these vaccines. And as you know, you're not allowed to touch the vaccines. You can't say anything negative about the vaccines. And so, there's just sort of a history there that would make him perceived in an unfavorable way by Joe Biden and perhaps his administration. Because my understanding is that Ashley Biden lost this diary, whatever happened with his diary. I mean, I understand from James's video, the claim is that she left it behind, which is every woman's worst nightmare, but that she left it behind in some hotel room. And then somebody else going into the hotel room was like, oh my God, this is Ashley Biden's diary. And there's crazy stuff in here, that she left it behind. But she was only then candidate Biden's daughter. So what would the FBI, what kind of jurisdiction, why would they be involved at all?
Why would they be involved at all under any circumstances, whether it's, you or me or the adult troubled daughter of the current president of the United States? The answer is they shouldn't be involved. And there's so many threads here, Megyn. It would take hours to go through the problems with this, but just to start at the top, the United States Supreme Court has ruled in multiple cases, and the most recent and well-cited of these is Bartnicki versus Vopper in 2001. So 20 years ago, the United States Supreme Court ruled that it is perfectly legal for a journalist to be in possession of and to publish stolen property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's why, just to jump in, that's why we saw all the press publish the Sarah Palin stolen emails and defended that, right? Because they weren't the ones who stole them. But if you're given stolen emails and they're newsworthy, you can publish them. That's the position James says he was in. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Absolutely correct. And on top of that, there's a long history of this. And on top of that, the entire press corps in D.C., paid its mortgages over the last 5 years over stolen materials from the Trump administration. And so nobody ever broke down their doors. And so, what's even more ironic is that just this week, one of the main critics of the Project Veritas and opponent in litigation, the New York Times, published several legal memos that are from Project Veritas. I don't know how they got their hands on it. I will say, I think that raises a lot of questions about some correspondence happening between the DOJ and the New York Times.
Yes.
But so on the legal front, it's legal to possess and publish stolen material as the press, period, full stop. Not an open question. And on top of that, the United States Department of Justice, in a slap to the prior administration, in July of this year, issued very detailed guidelines saying we will no longer issue search warrants to journalists or subpoenas, except in circumstances involving, their being suspected with probable cause of committing the crime in question. I don't think the DOJ has that evidence. I feel pretty confident they don't have that evidence because my client did what journalists do every day in the United States and the world: respond to a tip, evaluate the tip, decide not to run the tip, and turn the material over to somebody else. I will also add that the materials in this diary got published without our client's participation in a different publication called the National File, and they're out there for people to read, and they have been for a year.
Wow.
It's really sad stuff. I haven't read through all of it. I think people would have found it newsworthy, but it could not be verified at the time. What's also disturbing, Megyn, is that the New York Times was tipped off to these raids at the same time or in advance of them happening. So both of the raids on the two journalists that happened on the Thursday before James was raided, the New York Times was Johnny on the spot, immediately asking for comment within minutes of those raids occurring. No other journalist was. And these people aren't exactly, these raids aren't happening in Times Square. They're not happening in places where anybody could see them. Same thing with James's raid. James's phones have been taken, but the New York Times is calling the lawyer for comment within minutes of it happening after 6 a.m. On the East Coast time. It's clear that the DOJ has a leak to the New York Times, and that's disturbing as well. Imagine if it were you or me and a legitimate law enforcement operation is happening and your litigation opponent is getting leaks from the DOJ. So Tom Cotton has demanded an investigation by a letter to Merrick Garland into exactly what happened here and how the DOJ is ignoring its own guidelines with respect to sending, battering rams to the doors of United States journalists. I think everybody should be worried about this, whether you like Project Veritas or not.
That is crazy. It's not like James is accused of running a shop of terror. It's a diary. Who uses a battering ram on the home of a journalistic outfit and it's over, right? He says he already gave it over to law enforcement. He never published it.
A year ago on election day, a year ago. And so he doesn't have possession of it. They know this. The Biden family, the Biden campaign refused to ever corroborate the authenticity of this document. So what standing do they have? And what is really going on here? I'll tell you what I think is going on. The 2 telephones that were seized from our client and probably other materials from his former colleagues include, but are not limited to, numerous attorney-client communications between Mr. O'Keefe and his lawyers, including me. I represent Project Veritas in lawsuits against Twitter and against CNN. And there are about 36 other lawyers who are listed in our motion for a special master to the Southern District of New York, which the court has ordered a response to. Also, all of Project Veritas is confidential donor information. Project Veritas is a nonprofit journalism outfit, and their donors communicate with Mr. O'Keefe, and their information is private and secure from government inquiry under the First Amendment in a Supreme Court case that was recently ruled on in the Bonta case. And then finally, and probably most troubling, is all of Project Veritas's sources who communicate with James O'Keefe. As you mentioned, he is a critic of the United States government and has been forever. He is a critic of big tech and has executed multiple sting operations on every major American big tech corporation. Yep. And finally, Big Pharma. There are numerous leaks coming out with respect to Big Pharma. He has had a sting operation on CNN. It goes on and on. The government has the diary, or Ms. Biden has her diary back. But what the government also has now is multiple types of confidential privileged communications that are protected by the First Amendment and many other laws. And what are they doing with it? I do not know what they're doing with it. When our chief counsel, Paul Calley, who's handling this matter, asked the DOJ to pause the review of those until we could get the court to weigh in on it, they said, no, we're not going to pause it. So now the court has ordered a pause on the review of those materials until a special master can be considered by the court. And the journalism organization I mentioned, the Reporters Committee for Protection of Journalists, I'm getting the name wrong, has also filed a motion with the court to unseal those materials that underlie this, because it should be of concern to every reporter and every journalist in America. What does it take for the government to get the opportunity to seize your notes, your communications with your lawyers, and other private information?